Trump-Putin meeting, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and Europe versus Google. I'm Heather Godwin, and this is the Square Circle. And welcome to the Square Circle. I'm your host, Heather Godwin. Joining us today are Gregory Clay of gdclay.com, conservative commentator Valerie Greenfeld, and political reporter James Rosen. Welcome, everyone. Nice to have you.
Good to be here. All right.
President Trump's highly anticipated meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin took place this week. Mr. Trump came under fire from leaders of both parties for his light touch approach with the Russian leader, failing to confront him on Moscow's interference in the 2016 U.S. election. Then there was this.
In a key sentence in my remarks, I said the word would instead of wouldn't. The sentence should have been, I don't see any reason why I wouldn't, or why it wouldn't be Russia.
So, James Rosen, I will start with you. Was this shrewd diplomacy or a dangerous faux pas?
Я могу говорить по-русски. I could answer in Russian, but for our English-speaking audience,
thank you for our guests. That would be good.
I think this was nowhere close to shrewd diplomacy. I think it was. I mean, normally you could rack it up to just another Trump mistake, but I think in this case it's more than that. I said on this show almost exactly a year ago that President Trump would not serve out his term. I am standing by that prediction, and I think this trip, President Putin made it even more clear that he is holding something on President Trump. I think the Russians have compromised President Trump. There's no other explanation I have for the fact that I don't think even once, since running for president, being president, has President Trump even criticized, not once, has he criticized Putin. He's criticized our European allies. He said a few days ago that the European Union is a foe of ours. He's criticized, before he liked the North Korean leader, he criticized him. He's criticized everybody. He hasn't criticized President Putin. And so I think that this is, I don't think this is going to go in a good place. I think that Mueller and his team of prosecutors are getting the goods on President Trump, and I think his days are numbered.
Valerie Greenfeld, what is your opinion?
I think that's quite extreme. The Mueller investigation has been going on for over a year and has yet to find anything that they can use against President Trump.
I don't agree with that, but okay.
And in fact, they're wondering when are they going to be wrapping it up, because it's costing taxpayers all this money. And nothing's happening except more news and more ammunition for the left, which really is.
They've indicted 30 people.
But Trump himself is the reason that they're going after. The whole point of the investigation was to get Trump, as you said, that he's not going to make it to the next election, and they really have found zero on him per se.
We don't really know that.
So what we don't know, we can't speak about. But what we do know is they haven't found anything yet.
No.
Gregory Clay, what's your opinion?
Well, I think it's interesting that Vladimir Putin admitted that he wanted Donald Trump to win the election. I mean, just straight up said it.
He did.
I find that interesting. I also find it interesting on the other side that a poll on Wednesday said that 68% of Republicans, regular Republicans polled, said they liked the way Donald Trump handled the Vladimir Putin situation during the summit in Helsinki, which is also interesting. And it's also interesting that Democrats in Congress are calling for the translator to appear.
They lost that vote.
Yeah.
But it was a ridiculous idea in the first place.
And what was the translator supposed to clear up?
Well, they were the only ones that he should have.
Yeah, because Donald Trump hasn't said what he agreed to with Putin or didn't agree to.
But why does that have to be public information? I mean, there's a reason that they have closed doors.
Well, because Putin went back and has said publicly that they reached various agreements. So he's telling the Russian people they reached agreements.
Yeah. Right. So we've
President
heard more
Trump's not
from
saying
Russia than the president. We heard more from Vladimir Putin about this than the president. You know, and Lindsey Graham went off on Thursday, you know, saying no way that a translator should have to be testifying or going before Congress, because then it would compromise the president's ability to speak and negotiate, et cetera, with a foreign leader. You know, and Lindsey Graham was one of the many who was vehemently opposed, you know, to this idea.
So then could we say that, you know, his sort of kowtowing to Putin by saying that he was essentially on his side was a good diplomatic move and opened up conversation rather than just coming out and denouncing him immediately?
I don't think he was necessarily saying he was on Putin's side. I think maybe it was a Freudian slip in some ways that against the intelligence community. I mean, what's going on with the intelligence community behind the scenes, as you were discussing, is not a pretty picture for the administration or for the president himself. So in some ways, I think it was just he was talking and this is what came out, and it was clearly a mistake. But I think that people should look at Trump's actions and don't worry about every
Not
little
the
word
words.
that he says. He's a human being. He's going to make mistakes now and then. But the actions, this is what he's known for. This is what he does.
But there's one slight problem with that scenario, check the action, but not the word, is that the frequency of this happening, I mean, it happens so often. You know, I mean, come on. I mean, whether you like Donald Trump or not, whether you're pro-Donald Trump or anti-Donald Trump, whatever the hell you are, you know, I mean, we see this every week, you know, where he says something, and then poor Sarah Huckabee Sanders has to get up there and, you know, basically contort herself like a pretzel to come up with some real or somewhat plausible explanation as to what was going on. I mean, what did he really say, and what did he mean? And of course, the White House Media Corps is going to grill her like crazy. And you know, we see it every week, almost every day. And I mean, how many times is it going to happen? You would think that the White House at some point would say, "Hey, let's get together, have a big meeting, have our own little summit. Maybe meet at Lafayette Square Park."
Rehearse a little bit.
Yeah, rehearse.
I think
That's
they
key
do-
word.
I
And
think
get it
they do
together.
They do that, and then Trump says whatever he wants.
He wants,
They do
exactly.
do
He is
that.
the president of the
Yeah.
United
Yeah,
States.
I'm not
He's
saying it's
beholden
necessary.
to his
I'm not
staff
saying
and
it's.
media.
I'm not saying it's wrong, but I mean, Valer, I have to correct you. You said the liberals have been trying to bring Trump down. It's the intelligence community. They're not exactly liberal. FBI Director Wray was on television this afternoon, strongly criticizing
Thursday afternoon. Thursday afternoon.
strongly criticizing Trump's behavior with Putin. Former DNI Director of National Intelligence Clapper, other senior intelligence officials, they're all criticizing him.
Right.
And they're not liberals.
Right.
And what I said on this show 1 year ago was that Trump would not serve out his term, not because of the liberals, but because he had alienated the intelligence. No, he had alienated the intelligence community.
I think the intelligence community was the way it is now before he came in. And that was the whole idea that he ran on, was draining the swamp.
Okay, but you said
And
you
it's
said
hard
it
to
was
have-
liberals. You said it was
I
liberals.
do believe that it's liberals.
You think the intelligence folks are liberal?
I think there are many that are liberal. Yes, they're not one party. These are the same people that worked under Obama. You can't just like get rid of people that have had a career all the way from the.
Well, and they worked
through the
under W.
FBI.
Bush too.
So what I'm saying is, it's a mixture. It's a mixture of people. You don't quit your job because a new president comes in.
Right.
So there's a mixture of all kinds of people in the intelligence community, and some of them, as you've seen in the hearings this week with Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, some of them have taken over to their own responsibility illegally, things that they should not have done. So there
But the
is
intelligence
evidence.
community, the
there is
intelligence community
evidence
went out
there.
of their way under President George W. Bush to support and justify the invasion and occupation of Iraq. It's not exactly a liberal position. He was a Republican. I mean,
I'm not saying every person is of one party or the other. I'm saying draining the swamp means there are people in various agencies that are against the president.
But right now, with this whole Vladimir Putin thing, Republicans are against him just as much as the Democrats. That's Rosen's point.
Well, I think there's another point to be made. You brought up Sarah Huckabee
Huckabee Sanders.
You know, she can't even go out to dinner.
Quick point, and then we'll move on. I'm sorry, go ahead.
It's fine. It's fine.
Okay, I'd like to remind our viewers that you can submit your questions to our guests through our website, www.publicsquare.net, or via Facebook or Twitter, and we'll answer as many as we can live on air toward the end of the show. Also this week, Democratic congressional candidate Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had a rough time in an interview with Margaret Hoover on PBS's The Firing Line. Here's part of it.
I also think that what people are starting to see, at least in the occupation of Palestine, is just an increasing crisis of humanitarian condition.
You use the term the occupation of Palestine. What did you mean by that?
Oh, I think what I meant is like the settlements that are increasing in some of these areas and places where Palestinians are experiencing difficulty in access to their housing and homes.
Do you think you can expand on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd also just, I am not the expert on geopolitics on this issue.
All right, this one's for you, Gregory Clay. Do you think Ms. Ocasio-Cortez is in over her head?
Well, let me say this. First of all, I think Alexandria is the Donald Trump version of the socialist movement. What does that mean?
Yes,
Bernie
what does that
Sanders.
mean?
Bernie Sanders.
And in other words, we were just talking about how Donald Trump says wild stuff, and then has to, do the Michael Jackson moonwalk. And Alexandria had to do the same thing. She says wild stuff, interesting things, et cetera, about Israel, basically calling Israel an occupied force and against the Palestinians, and one thing after another. And now she's walking a lot of this stuff back on multiple shows, multiple PBS shows. She did it on Firing Line. She did it on Democracy Now. And then when she gets in trouble doing her walk back, doing her Michael Jackson impersonation with the moonwalk, she's talked about how, well, but I'm from the Bronx. So, she's from Parkchester, the Parkchester section of the Bronx. She says, I'm from the Bronx, and Israel relations weren't a big subject during our nightly dinner table talk. But I'm like, wait a minute. But then you check out her background, and she went to Boston University, graduated 4th in her class. She double majored in economics and international relations. I find that most peculiar. And remember, she also talked about economics that she had to walk back. When she said that the only reason that the unemployment rate is at, well, now it's 4%, but it was at 3.8, is because people have multiple jobs. But it's only one person, though. It ain't like if you got 3 jobs, you count as 3 people, And PolitiFact, talked about that, when checking her facts and everything, and of course she had to walk that back, And again, that's why I call Alexandria the Donald Trump version of the Socialist Party.
Valerie, what's your opinion?
I think that she needs to, somebody, like you said, that went to Boston University should know better than saying something that she doesn't know, and just trying to get through the questions.
Yeah. Considering this is a major.
She's 28. She's very young.
That is young.
And I think, some Democrats are saying she's the future of the Democratic Party. She's a socialist.
Oh, God.
Maybe she's the Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. They're the grandparents, and she's the daughter. She's bringing up the party, and I don't know, but I certainly hope for the Democrats' sake that that's not true, because she really needs to work on, talking about ICE, that she wants to destroy ICE, and who's going to protect our country. Who's going to protect the border and the illegal drugs coming across, and the trafficking and all of these things. And the airports, she has all kinds of comments, like you said, that are completely off the wall. And, in politics, you can't just run away from that.
Yeah, nothing is really cut and
She's
dry.
a scary lady.
What's your opinion?
Well, she's young. She's finding out that it's one thing to win a Democratic primary in your own state, in your own district. It's another thing once she's not in Washington yet, but she's expected to win that seat. And she's effectively being covered not only like a member of Congress, but like a star member of Congress, because she's so unusual.
Right.
And she's got a much brighter light shining on her, And, she's going to find out that you have to think, as Valerie and Clay have said, you have to think before you talk. But I think the Democratic Party has had a dearth of young new talent coming up. I mean, you mentioned Nancy Pelosi. I mean, she's been there forever. Chuck Schumer's been there forever. So it's kind of refreshing to see a very young face. She's gonna have some stumbles along the way.
Is she kind of the first millennial that's really risen to this? Can you think of any others in her age range, even in the early 30s, that have gotten this far?
And in her case, 28. And like Rosen said, she's such an unusual candidate as well as an unusual person. Because I think a lot of times with folk, anybody, I don't care if it's a politician, mathematician, what kind of issue you got, you should first read a person's background. Her background is most interesting. I mean, she even has an asteroid named after her. 22322 Ocasio-Cortez, because when she was in high school, she was a science star. Yeah, she's serious. She's serious into science, and she won awards for science projects. So the International Astronomical Union decided to name this asteroid after her. She's such an unusual person.
So she's clearly bright.
Yeah, very, very bright.
She's probably smarter than most members.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
Which makes it even more dangerous, because now I'm thinking she means what she says. I mean, if she's that bright, why is she making this kind of mistakes? These kinds of mistakes. It's very radical ideas that she's saying.
Well, in very broad strokes, getting rid of ICE, like you say, that's not just about the illegal immigration system that we've got going on. It covers a lot more than that.
Well, she's not the only one who's saying that, and I think they want to replace it with something else. They don't just want to leave our borders wide open.
Which is another
Right.
problem.
And the Democrats have to be careful with her, hitching their wagon to her too fast, because that could backfire on her.
I think it's backfiring now.
Because socialism is a dangerous word in the United States.
Well, maybe she'll be
she's against capitalism. I mean, come on.
Okay.
Come on.
Maybe she'll be Joe Biden's
Come
running
on.
mate.
No,
I
you
don't
cannot
understand how she
be
got
against the
elected.
C word.
All right. And finally, the European Union made a major statement with a record-setting fine on Google for antitrust violations. Here's the EU Commissioner's announcement.
Google has engaged in illegal practices to cement its dominant market position in Internet search. It must put an effective end to this conduct within 90 days or face penalty payments. It has obstructed the development of competing mobile operating systems. These could have provided a platform for rival search engines to gain traffic.
And Valerie Greenfeld, this one is for you. Do you think the EU is right?
Well, I think clearly Google has somewhat of a monopoly, and that's an antitrust issue for sure. But I also am concerned about what the EU does. The Commission doesn't necessarily follow what they say. I mean, look at an example would be Airbus, who they've been giving money to develop the company, and then they're our competitor against Boeing, and would be against our laws to help Boeing. So we're not playing on the same playing field, and I think that it's easy to dish it out, but when it comes to the other side, I think they should take a little bit of look at that. Although I do agree that Google, I mean, it's a verb already. Google it. It's become a household name. So in a sense, yes, it does have a monopoly, and I do agree that there's antitrust issues here. And so Google's been given a $5.1 billion fine for that, and they've got 90 days to fix the problem. So Android, what they did was they went to Android and they said they have to download the Google products before they sell them, before they sell the Android, and this does in effect give Google a huge lift with regard to other companies. So, I think the same thing as we were discussing about Mark Zuckerberg, in Facebook. He came before Congress recently, and there's another issue there. These companies have a lot of power, and they're in charge of what information people get, and that's just extraordinary.
What's your opinion?
Well, I think that I have mixed feelings because I love Google.
We all Google.
I'm a reporter, and I actually like Facebook too. There's a lot of interesting stuff on Facebook, and they both and other digital companies have changed our world. They've revolutionized our world, and I don't want to see them restrained too much. But when Zuckerberg allows Holocaust denials to post, which is totally wrong. I don't think they have any place in the public sphere. And when Google tries to squash any other form of competition, I don't like that. So,
What do you think, Gregory?
Well, to me, it's a situation that's most ironic. You're going to fine somebody $5 billion, okay, when the customers like the product, because studies have shown that 80% of the smartphone users in Europe love Google, and you're going to find them. I mean, come on, because apparently they love the apps such as, the maps, and of course they love YouTube and Gmail and all that. And they're already hooked on it. They're already hooked on Google. And so maybe this should have happened maybe, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, before the hooking occurred. But people will probably, once they get the phone, try to find the app anyway, because, they're already attached to the Google apps. The Google apps are very popular in Europe. And it's just, I mean, okay, antitrust situations or not. If you're a customer, do you really care? Do you really care about antitrust situations, monopolies, et cetera, et cetera? You want the apps. You want YouTube, and you want the maps, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that most of the customers over there are just going to say, "Hey, I want my Google." That's right.
Well, this way they have a choice.
Yeah.
I do see a problem with that because these companies have more power than some countries. And the more power they get, the more they can control the information that the world sees. And when it's bent from one side to the other, whichever it may be, and most usually it's to the liberal side, it can really sway people's opinions.
Well, that was something that was brought up in the congressional hearing that Google and YouTube and Facebook all had this week, was that because you use the algorithm that mirrors what people are interested in, they create their own bubble, and it causes friction because people can live in their own bubble with a limited amount of information. So do you think a fine like this might open the gates a little bit for not creating such intense bubbles?
I don't think $5 billion sounds like a lot of money to us.
No.
I don't think-
It's
To
2
Google.
weeks.
Yeah, I don't think it's a lot of money.
It's not
It's
that
worth
much
of
for
their-
Google.
Oh, it's 2
Their
weeks
revenue.
worth of
Their
their revenue?
revenue. Yeah,
Wow.
it's
Not
That's
that much for
very
Google.
interesting. Wow.
Yeah.
All right, on that note, let's take some questions from our viewers. We have Rebecca Rogers. Do you think that Trump is lying about saying would when he meant wouldn't?
Yes.
Depends on
That was quick.
It depends on the definition of what is.
Is. Wasn't that Bill Clinton?
Yeah, that was Clinton.
I remember that.
Just like Bill Clinton was lying in a deposition, President Trump was lying. He just made that up because it was one of the few times when he buckled to overwhelming public pressure.
Right, and
One
had
of the
to
very
walk
few
something
times
back.
he had to walk
He
something
did his moonwalk. He was Mike. I guess he woke up and said, "Hey, today I got to be like Mike. I got to do the moonwalk."
But even when he reversed himself at the very end, he said, I really meant would. I really meant would instead of wouldn't. And then his last sentence was, but could be other people.
Could be other people.
Okay.
Right,
A lot of other
and,
people.
And once he sees that poll that came out on Wednesday, that 68% of Republicans support the way he handled Vladimir Putin in Helsinki, he'll probably say, "Hey, forget about what I said."
No, that's problematic though, because his overall approval rating with Republicans is 87%. Seriously, and it means that a fairly large segment, 19% of Republicans, his own party, didn't like. They like him. They didn't like how he handled Putin. So
That seems like a small percentage, though.
Yeah, you said 19%.
no, yeah, it's 1/5. It's 1/5.
But I'm talking about 68%.
No,
of
but-
Republicans liked the way he handled the
Yeah,
Vladimir
but
Putin.
87% like him overall.
Overall, yeah.
So his approval rating with Putin was considerably lower.
All right, we'll take our next question from Raymond Roberson. If Putin does have dirt on Trump, What do you think it would be?
Oh,
Who wants to
I'll
take
take
that
it.
one?
Uh-oh.
Okay.
Should have
I'll
known.
take
All right, here we
Should've
go.
known.
I mean, maybe I shouldn't say this in the air. I married when I covered Moscow and the Soviet Union I married a Soviet citizen from the Baltics. I have some experience with this, and on a smaller scale. And I can assure you that when a flamboyant billionaire New Yorker developer comes to Moscow to possibly build the Trump Tower, to host the Miss Universe pageant, I can assure you that there's at least 100 senior KGB agents assigned to him. And I think that they, it's not just the Soviet Union. Throughout Eastern Europe, there's a long history of what's called compromat in Russian, which means compromising people. They routinely collect damaging information on people to use against them in the future, if necessary. Someone like President Trump, I think they created some of the damaging information. I think they sent extremely attractive call girls to his suite, and we know what happened after that. So
That's the Christopher Steele dossier.
what's that?
That's the Christopher Steele dossier, right? About the supposed call girls and prostitutes and all that.
The made-up one.
Yeah,
The
he was
infamous party.
the made-up dossier. No. He was only the top Russian expert in the British M5. That's all. So I mean, I'm not sure why we think it was made up. But.
So Valerie, what kind of dirt do you think that it would be?
I have no idea, and I wouldn't even dare to try to figure that out. But
You don't think there is any dirt, right? Am I right?
I have no idea. There could be dirt. I don't know what it would be, but
I'll take that
I
as a
just
no.
don't know the answer.
I'll take that. As a
What would you offer as another explanation for why he has not criticized President Putin in 2.5 years? Not, I don't believe once has he
I
criticized
really
him.
don't know. I think that the press and some Americans need to just relax a little bit and inhale
Take a deep breath.
and exhale and
Deepak
just let
Chopra.
it be, and let's see what happens.
Okay. And now it's time for the most underreported story of the week. Who would like to start?
Well, I'll start.
Keep the train going?
Yep. President Trump says so many things that grab headlines and take up a lot of TV space and internet bandwidth that sometimes he says things that are important and interesting that actually don't get covered very widely. And there's one case this week, he criticized the Federal Reserve for its relatively recent policy of raising interest rates. He said that it's hurting the economy, and this breaks a tradition, a kind of unspoken convention where recent presidents, you're not supposed to criticize Federal Reserve decisions, and the whole idea is that we don't want Federal Reserve decisions and thinking being politicized. Of course, that doesn't apply to President Trump.
Valerie?
So I wanted to bring up the Mark Zuckerberg, what you had begun to talk about earlier, with regard to Facebook and some of the Holocaust denials that were posted on Facebook. And it's not only, it's not only that, it's all kinds of free speech. It's jihadists, and traffickers, all kinds of people that are out to get young, innocent people that are on Facebook, and that's usually very, very young people that really don't know how much danger they're in. And free speech is important, but also protecting our children is important. And I think that Mark Zuckerberg is a little bit in a spot. But with regard to the Holocaust, there's no denying that.
Gregory?
Yes, a group of female psychologists in Florida, they were university professors, conducted a study, and they discovered that quite often very attractive women prefer to select very unattractive guys. And because if you get an unattractive guy, there's less pressure, less stress, because he won't expect you to always look good when you go out, always have the hair at max, makeup, beautiful clothes, etc., etc.
All right, a little more relaxing. That is all for this week. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Heather Godwin, and thanks for watching The Square Circle. We'll see you next week.